You are probably sitting in a room right now where the only thing you can hear is the low, rhythmic hum of your refrigerator. Maybe it's the distant, muffled drone of tires on a wet highway or the faint electronic buzz coming from your laptop charger. We usually call this silence, but it isn't. Our modern world is wrapped in a constant, artificial white noise that we've learned to tune out just to stay sane. But if you were to take a time machine back about 50,000 years and step out into the tall grass of the Pleistocene, that hum would be gone. You would find yourself in a world of absolute, staggering, high-definition silence, and yet, that silence was exactly what allowed our ancestors to invent the most powerful technology the human brain has ever known. We think of music as a hobby or a background track for our workouts, but for the people who lived before the first song was ever sung, sound was a matter of life and death. The shift from hearing a noise to hearing a melody was arguably the most important software update in the history of our species. Before we had Spotify, we had the wind. Before we had drums, we had our own heartbeats. And if you think you could have survived a single day in that pre-musical world, you're probably underestimating just how loud the silence really was. Think about the last time you were truly bored, the kind of boredom where you've scrolled through every app and there is absolutely nothing left to do. For an ancient human living 100,000 years ago, that kind of boredom didn't really exist, because their all day was consumed by a sensory intensity we can barely imagine. Before music, the soundscape was your primary survival tool. Every snap of a twig, every change in the pitch of the wind through the acacia trees, and every rhythmic thud of a distant herd was a data point. Biologists often point out that our ears are actually much better than our eyes at detecting threats from all directions, which, if you think about it, is why you can sleep with your eyes closed but not your ears. In the pre-music era, humans spent their days in a state of hyper-focused, deep listening. They weren't just killing time, they were analyzing the acoustic environment with the precision of a modern audio engineer. They had to know the difference between the rustle of a breeze and the rustle of a predator's fur against dry grass. But this creates a paradox. If they were so focused on the functional, scary sounds of survival, why on earth did they start making sounds that didn't mean anything? Why would a hunter-gatherer, someone living on the edge of starvation and exhaustion, spend hours blowing into a hollowed-out bone just to hear a pretty noise? To understand that, we have to look at the hardware. Long before we were musicians, we were biological acoustic machines. Around 200,000 years ago, a massive shift occurred in human anatomy, the descent of the larynx. Now, most animals have a larynx that sits high in the throat, which allows them to eat and breathe at the same time without choking. Human babies are actually born this way too, a little survival carryover, but as we grow, our larynx drops lower. This was a risky evolutionary trade-off because it made us the only primates that can easily choke on our lunch, but it gave us something incredible, an elongated throat cavity that acts as a resonance chamber. This anatomical quirk, researched extensively by cognitive scientists like Philip Lieberman, is what allowed us to produce the wide range of vowels and pitches necessary for both complex speech and, eventually, singing. But here is the wow fact most people miss. We had the hardware for singing long before we had the software for language. This means for tens of thousands of years, our ancestors were walking around with the vocal equivalent of a Stradivarius violin in their throats, but they were only using it to make basic grunts and alarm calls. They had the capacity for Bohemian Rhapsody, but they were living in a world of silence. Imagine a typical afternoon in the life of a prehistoric group. And honestly, it was probably a lot more social than we give them credit for. They weren't just sitting in caves staring at the walls. Without the distraction of digital entertainment or recorded sound, their primary source of stimulation was each other. This is where the concept of motherese comes in. Researchers like Fernald at Stanford University have found that mothers across every single culture on Earth use a specific kind of melodic, rhythmic speech when talking to infants. It's higher in pitch, it has exaggerated glides, and it's deeply musical. Evolutionarily speaking, this likely started as a way for a mother to keep a leash on her baby using sound while her hands were busy gathering tubers or cleaning hides. Before there was music, there was the lullaby of utility. It was a rhythmic vocal signal that said, "I am here, you are safe, keep calm." This wasn't a song, It was a survival beacon. It's highly likely that the very first melodies were just extended versions of these vocal reassurances. We were singing to our babies to keep them from crying and attracting leopards long before we were singing to gods or kings. But humans are also rhythmic by nature because our bodies are built on cycles, something we often forget until we're trying to catch our breath after a flight of stairs. We have a walking gait that is inherently metronomic. We have a heartbeat that provides a constant, internal click-track. This led to the first real instrument in human history, the body itself. Long before the first flute, there was the stomp. Imagine a group of 20 humans moving together across a plain. Their footsteps naturally begin to synchronize. It's a phenomenon called entrainment. When we move in rhythm with others, our brains release a cocktail of neurochemicals, primarily endorphins and oxytocin. Robin Dunbar, an evolutionary psychologist at Oxford University, has spent decades studying how this works. He argues that before we had the social glue of music, we had social grooming. Monkeys spend hours picking lice off each other to build trust. But as human groups got larger, we didn't have enough hours in the day to groom everyone individually. We needed a way to groom the whole tribe at once. The answer was rhythmic movement. A group of humans stomping their feet or clapping their hands together creates a collective high that bonds them instantly. The first concert wasn't a performance. It was a massive, sweat-drenched, rhythmic bonding session that made the tribe feel like a single organism. Eventually, though, the body wasn't enough, and our ancestors started looking at the world around them as a potential soundboard. This brings us to one of the most incredible archaeological finds in human history. In the Geisenklostrel cave in southern Germany, researchers discovered flutes made from mammoth ivory and the wing bones of swans. These aren't just whistles, they are sophisticated instruments. Carbon dating places them at roughly 43,000 years old. To put that in perspective, that's the middle of the last ice age. These people were living in a world of woolly mammoths and terrifyingly large cave bears, yet they took the time to precisely drill holes into a bird bone to create a pentatonic scale. But why would you do that when you could be sharpening a spear? The answer is that these flutes were likely technology for the soul. When you live in a world of constant survival stress, the ability to create a sound that isn't found in nature, a pure, haunting, melodic tone, is a form of magic. It provided a psychological relief that nothing else could. Those early flute players weren't just making tunes, they were creating a headspace that allowed their tribe to relax, to imagine and to dream. Now, you might be wondering, which is a fair question, why did this happen to us and not, say, chimpanzees? Chimps are incredibly smart, and they've been observed drumming on the buttress roots of trees with their hands and feet. They clearly enjoy the resonance. But they don't have rhythm in the way we do. If you try to get a chimpanzee to tap its foot to a beat, it can't really do it. Humans have a unique neural connection between our auditory cortex and our motor cortex. We don't just hear music, we feel the need to move to it. This is a wow fact of neuroscience. Music is one of the only activities that activates almost every single part of the brain simultaneously. It's like a full-body workout for your gray matter. This suggests that music didn't just show up as a fun hobby. It was likely a spandrel, a term evolutionary biologists use for a trait that develops as a byproduct of other useful things. Our brains became so good at processing complex sounds for language and so good at coordinating our movements for long-distance running that, when those two systems collided, music was the result. We are the musical ape because our brains were pushed to the limit by the demands of survival, and music was the beautiful accident that happened when we finally had a moment of peace. But then there's the dating side of things. Charles Darwin, the father of evolution himself, had a very specific theory about why music exists. He thought it was all about sex. Darwin noticed that in the animal kingdom, music is almost always a fitness signal. Birds sing to defend territory and attract mates. Gibbon pairs sing duets to announce their relationship status to the rest of the forest. Darwin argued that human music started as a form of proto-language used during courtship. If you could sing a complex, beautiful melody, it showed that you had a healthy brain, good lung capacity, and enough free time to practice, Basically, it was the prehistoric version of a verified Instagram profile. While modern scientists think this is only part of the story, it explains why music is so deeply tied to our emotions and our romance centers. Before music was an industry, it was a way to show a potential partner that you were a high-quality human. The rock star trope isn't a modern invention. It's literally coded into our DNA from the days when the best singer in the tribe was the one everyone wanted to sit next to at the fire. This leads us to a fascinating concept called the hymn theory, proposed by the archaeologist Stephen Mithen. He suggests that for a long period of our history, our ancestors spoke a language that was holistic, manipulative, multimodal, musical, and mimetic, or for short. In this world, there was no distinction between a song and a sentence. If you wanted to tell someone you were angry, you didn't just say the word angry. You used a specific, sharp, descending pitch. If you wanted to ask for help, you used a rising, melodic tone. Think about how we talk to dogs or babies today. We care more about the melody of our voice than the actual words. This was likely the standard mode of human communication for over 100,000 years. We lived in a world where every conversation was a kind of chant. Music wasn't something you listened to on a stage. It was the very fabric of how you understood other people. You felt their meaning through the music of their voice long before you understood their meaning through the logic of their words. And it's worth noting that we still do this today without even realizing it, because when you hear someone speak in a foreign language, you can still tell if they're joking, crying, or threatening you just by the music of their speech. This brings us to a major wow fact about our brains. We are actually hardwired for certain musical intervals. There is something called the perfect fifth. It's an interval that exists in almost every musical tradition on Earth, from Chinese folk songs to Western heavy metal. It's based on a mathematical ratio of sound waves. Our ears are physically tuned to find this interval pleasing because it mimics the natural harmonics of the human voice. This means that music isn't just a cultural invention, like the steam engine or the internet. Music is a discovery of the laws of physics as they apply to our own bodies. Our ancestors didn't create music, they found it. They found it in the way their voices resonated in a cave and the way two different bird-bone flutes sounded when played at the same time. But what did they do with this discovery all day? Well, if you were an ancient human, music was your everything app. It was your history book, your map, and your legal system. In cultures without writing, information is incredibly fragile. If you just tell someone a list of edible plants, they might forget it. But if you set that list to a catchy melody with a strong rhythm, it becomes sticky. This is why you can still remember the lyrics to a song from your childhood, but you can't remember what you had for lunch last Tuesday. Anthropologists like Lynn Kelly have studied how indigenous cultures use songlines to navigate thousands of miles of desert. Every landmark, every water hole, and every dangerous cliff is encoded into a song. To find your way home, you just have to sing the right verses in the right order. For most of human history, music was the hard drive of the species. We didn't have libraries, we had choirs. We didn't have GPS, we had ballads. The silence of the pre-musical world was eventually filled by the data of the musical world. We sang our world into existence because that was the only way to remember it. Then, there's the sheer neurochemical power of it all. When a group of people sings together, their heart rates actually begin to synchronize. It's a literal biological merger. In a study published in the journal Science in 2019, Samuel Mayer and his team analyzed the music of 315 different cultures and found that music is truly universal, not just because everyone does it, but because everyone uses it for the same things. Healing songs, love songs, dance songs, and lullabies all sound right to us, even if they come from a culture on the other side of the planet. We are born with a musical template in our brains. This explains why music is so effective at treating things like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Even when the language parts of the brain are damaged, the music parts, which are older and more distributed, often remain intact. I've seen videos of elderly patients who haven't spoken in years suddenly becoming animated and singing along to a song from their youth. It's because music is stored in the very basement of our consciousness. Our ancestors knew this intuitively. They knew that if someone was sick or grieving, you didn't just give them medicine, you sang to them. You used sound to retune their nervous system. So, if we go back to that original question, what did they do all day? The answer is that they were building the foundation of what it means to be human. They were taking the raw, terrifying silence of nature and carving it into something beautiful and meaningful. They were using rhythm to turn a group of individuals into a tribe that could survive an ice age. They were using melody to turn a list of facts into a culture that could last for thousands of generations. They were tuning their own brains to be more creative, more empathetic, and more resilient. Music wasn't a luxury for them, it was the ultimate survival strategy. It was the thing that allowed us to stop being just another animal in the grass and start being creatures that could contemplate the stars. Which, if you think about it, makes our modern relationship with music a little strange, because we've taken this incredibly powerful, communal, life-saving technology and turned it into something we mostly do alone, with plastic buds jammed into our ears. We've gone from making music to consuming it. Our ancestors wouldn't recognize a world where music is background noise. For them, music was the foreground. It was the most important thing happening in the room. Every song was a live, one-time-only event that would never happen exactly the same way again. There were no replays or skips. You had to be present. You had to listen with your whole body. That all day they spent before recorded music was a day of intense, active engagement with the world of sound. It's actually quite funny, in a dark sort of way, how much we've domesticated sound. We've traded the bone flute for the smartphone, and in the process, we've lost that hyper-acute, deep listening that kept our ancestors alive. We live in a world where we can hear any song ever recorded with a single tap, but we often feel more isolated and less bonded than the group of 20 humans huddled around a fire in a cold German cave. We have the songs, but we've lost the entrainment. We have the melody, but we've lost the memory. We've conquered the silence, but we might have accidentally created a new kind of noise that drowns out the very things music was supposed to help us remember. Think about that the next time you put on your headphones to block out the world. You are using a 50,000-year-old evolutionary superpower to do the exact opposite of what it was designed for. You are using a bonding tool to isolate yourself. You are using a memory tool to distract yourself. Our ancestors spent there all day learning how to turn silence into a bridge between people. We spend our all day using sound as a wall. It's a complete reversal of the original human project. And yet, the hardware hasn't changed. Your brain is still that same Pleistocene organ, waiting for a rhythm to sync up with, waiting for a melody to anchor its memories to, and waiting for a social grooming session that no algorithm can provide. It's a strange realization, isn't it? To think that we are the first generation in the history of the world that has too much music. For 99% of our existence, music was a rare, sacred eruption in a silent world. It was a gift. It was a moment of grace. Today, it's a commodity that we use to fill the gaps in our day. But somewhere deep down, in the parts of your brain that still recognize a perfect fifth, or the motherese of a lullaby, the ancient listener is still there. They are still listening to the hum of the fridge, waiting for it to turn into a song. They are still waiting for the rhythm that makes the tribe feel like one. Because in the end, we didn't just invent music to kill time. We invented it to survive the silence. And without it, the silence might just be too loud to handle. Take a moment and actually listen to the room you're in right now. Really listen. Beneath the fan, the traffic, and the electronic hum, try to find the absolute silence. You can't do it. Your brain won't let you. We have spent so many thousands of years filling the void with rhythm and melody that we have physically lost the ability to experience a truly silent world. Your auditory cortex is so hungry for patterns that if you were placed in a completely soundproof room, an anechoic chamber, you would eventually start to hear your own nervous system and the rushing of your own blood as a high-pitched scream. We have literally rewired our biology to require sound because the silence of the pre-musical world was the most terrifying thing we ever encountered. You aren't just a person who likes music. You are the descendant of people who would have died without it. And the cold, undeniable fact is that you are currently living in a world where you have more access to noise than any human in history, yet you are likely more auditorily lonely than a hunter-gatherer from the Ice Age. We have conquered the quiet, but in doing so, we've made ourselves the only species on Earth that can be surrounded by music and still feel like we're screaming into a vacuum. If the music stopped tomorrow, you wouldn't just be bored, you would be fundamentally broken. So, the next time you find a song that actually makes you feel something, don't just play it. Listen to it. Because that sound is the only thing keeping the ancient, predatory silence from closing back in on you. If you want more deep dives into the weird ways our ancestors made us who we are, go ahead and subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next rabbit hole.